This week of Contender Series is absolutely disgusting. I did the research, I watched the tape, and let me tell you, boys, it's gross. It's gross. I don't see anybody on this card really having much to do in the UFC. I don't think anybody on this card is going to be some world beater. I don't know if anybody on this card is ever going to make it in the rankings. But at the end of the day, we got 5 fights to talk about. I'm going to go through, I'll give you a pick, I'll give you the breakdown of the fight, I'll tell you which fighter does what they do well, what they do bad, based on what I've seen. And a lot of times with these Contender Series, we don't really get to see a lot of film because these guys are frauds. So, got to take that into account, but let's get into it, man. Let's just do a little recap. So this isn't exactly the betting show. This is the picks show, the breakdown show, but we do like to highlight some stuff here. Favorites are winning. I have won 17 out of 24 fights. Last week, underdogs were 1-3. The only underdog that came through was Musasa, and he won a split decision. So it was a very close fight. Very easily could have been 0-4 for the underdogs. A lot of times we get some pretty big favorites too. And you got to take into account the Brazilian chick that won. She was an underdog. She flipped to the favorite towards the end. I bet on her as an underdog, so that was nice. Let's get into it with this week. I just watched the weigh-ins. The order that I have these in is based on what they did the weigh-in face-offs in. So I guess the first fight of the night is supposed to be Dylan Mantello and Ahmad Hassanzada. I love that name, Hassanzada. It's fun to say. If you watch his fights, they're not very fun. They're not very fun because I just don't know what this guy's on. I don't think these guys are very good. Just leave it at that. I don't think either of them will do well in the UFC if they get a contract. Both guys have fought on the Contender Series before, and they lost, and they both got finished. Now, granted, Hassanzada fought Nazim Sadikov, pretty solid fighter. Mantello, on the other hand, fought Kanan Krzyzewski, who I think is 0-2 in the UFC so far. Just lay that out there. So since fighting on the Contender Series, Mantello has one fight, and it's a win. And if you watch that fight, he didn't really look that great. He didn't really look that great because he's a guy that just walks you down. He's 6'1", pretty solid frame, pretty built. I actually think he might have a little bit of a physicality edge over Hassanzada, who's a little bit stringy, a little bit of a string bean, but Mantello's a little bit more filled out. If you watch that fight with Mantello, his last one, the dude is just walking through punches. I don't think he's very fast. I think his reactions are pretty slow. He's very hittable and not a lot of head movement. But he's very tough. He's willing to walk through the punches. And he's willing to take one to give one. And sometimes when he does take one and he gives one, his shot on you lands a little bit harder. Or I guess maybe his ability to just take the punches a little bit better. And he eventually knocked the guy out. I think it was the second round. But he took a lot of damage before that. So for that being his only fight since the last time he was on the Contender Series, it's not really a great look for Mantello, in my opinion. Ahmad Hassanzada, he's fought 3 times since last fighting on the Contender Series. He actually lost a fight after that. And I remember looking at this guy when I was looking through Sajikov's record just to see how they do. You know, when guys lose on the Contender Series and I'm looking at fights, I'm doing research, I always like to see how they do after they lose. And to see that this guy lost, this was a while ago. I saw he lost. I was like, all right, we'll probably never see him again. Because if you lose after you fight on the Contender Series, probably not going to see you again unless you're a Diego Lopes and you're an anomaly. I don't think Hassanzada is that guy. Okay, I watched this guy's fights. He's a low volume striker. He's not a guy that really like pumps a jab, pumps a 1-2. It's all these weird outside kicks, spinning back fists. And then he's going to try to take you to the ground. And his wrestling is okay. Like, he can get takedowns. I don't think his top control is very good. He'll go for some submissions, which could benefit him here because Mantello did get submitted on the Contender Series last time. I don't think Mantello's ground game is that good. So best path to victor for Hassanzada would be to go for the takedowns, make this a wrestling match, make this a grappling match, and he could win. But if he leaves it on the feet, I don't think Hassanzada has the durability or the power to deal with Mantello. Because Mantello's durable, but he's just very hittable. He's very hittable, but he's durable, and he's willing to walk through the punches to throw them on you. And we kind of saw in the Hassanzada fight with Mantello's teammate, actually, with Sadikov. Sadikov was there to be hit, but he was just throwing a lot more and landing a lot more, and Hassanzada was feeling it. He was feeling it. He was getting touched up. He was bloodied up. He was actually getting taken down to the ground and beaten up there. I'm going to go with Mantello for a pick. I don't like either of these guys for a future in the UFC, but I actually think Mantello should be good enough to stuff some wrestling from Hassanzada, and then if it's on the feet, I'm going to favor Mantello's durability. I'm going to favor his power a little bit more. I just don't really think too highly of Hassanzada on the feet. Obviously, if the fight hits the ground, that's Hassanzada's world, but I don't know that he has a great ability to get it there at will. So if he can't get the takedown, I don't want to say he's screwed, but he's at a disadvantage, I would say. So I'm going to take Mantello for a pick here. He is a slight underdog. It's a disgusting fight. I don't really like either guy, but that's the pick. We'll move on. It gets worse, man. It honestly gets worse. Yura Naito, 6-0 Japanese guy. I mean, we've seen a lot of these Japanese guys that fight on their regional scenes, and they're fighting absolute bums. That's this guy. Okay, the level of competition for both these guys is very bad. Some we got to deal with on Contender Series. The level of competition these guys are facing is terrible. Naito, a wrestler, a grappler. He wants to get you to the ground, land ground and pound, maybe look for a submission, but he's really looking to take you down and ground and pound you. Ateba Gautier, Cameroon guy, looked absolutely jacked at the weigh-ins today. He made Naito look like a Pillsbury Doughboy. Okay, he looked unbelievably jacked. So I got to believe this guy's physically strong. We saw last week, Musasa. If you watched last week and you saw Musasa's physicality, that was insane. Another African guy, Cameroon. Gautier here, I think he's going to be very physical. Very powerful punches. All of his wins come by knockout in round one. His only loss was a decision loss where he was getting taken down and he started to gas out by the second round. And he lost that fight by decision. He got taken down early. That kind of just zapped his gas tank. So there's red flags here on Gautier because I think it's Gautier. I'll call him Ateba. There's red flags on Ateba because he can gas out. He doesn't have the best takedown defense, but I got to believe he's trying to improve that, and I got to believe he's very physically strong. We saw last week Musasa's hips were absolutely insane on those takedowns from Tanzalov. Naito needs to get takedowns here. Otherwise, I think he's screwed. I think Gautier is probably a lot more powerful. I think he's going to have a physicality edge here. The conditioning for Ateba is the question mark. Can he make it to the second and the third round? Is he going to look the same? These are all unknowns that we just don't know. Like, I can't predict it. I can't predict if his gas tank's going to hold up. From what we've seen, probably not. But maybe he's worked on it. Maybe he's worked on his wrestling. We don't know. That was a good amount of time ago. Naito, on the other hand, I don't think highly of him either. It's a disgusting fight. For the sake of the pick, I'm going to take Ateba Gautier because I like the power on the feet, and I just don't like taking these Japanese wrestlers that, unless your name's like a Rinya Nakamura, you know? Not really too sold on this Yura Naito guy. And after I watched the face-offs, I'm like, how can I be sold on this guy when he looks like the Pillsbury Doughboy and Ateba Gautier looks like Francis Ngannou out there? Okay, I'm going to take Ateba, but there's not a lot of film on either of these guys. And I'm just going to take the guy with more power. Dana White Contender Series, we like finishes. We don't like crotch sniffers. So you're a Naito, you're out. Give me Ateba. This is a good fight here. This is a good fight. Not that I believe either of these guys are going to be anything too crazy. I think Joey Hart has a higher ceiling in the UFC. But let's just talk about the fight. Benjamin Button here. Benjamin Bennett. Mr. Alaska. Solid fighter. Watch his... Ooh, good burp. You watch his fights, you're like, okay, this guy's pretty solid. His only loss is to Trey Waters in a fight that he was winning. You go back and watch that fight, he was winning the... Jeez. He was winning the fight. There's like he was winning the third round. He won the first 2 rounds, winning the third round, and then he gets hit with a knee up the middle and just gets flatline KO'd. Benjamin Button here, he's a wrestler boxer, and I really think he should just wrestle more. I think he really just boxes based on the fact that people don't really love to watch wrestling, and he probably likes to make the fight a little bit more exciting, and he probably likes to make the fight exciting for himself. The problem is with his boxing, I don't really think it's the most powerful, because if you watch his punches, he's kind of just out there touching. He's like just doing these little combinations, just kind of touching you. It kind of reminds me of like a Nicholas Dalby, because he's a forward pressure fighter that doesn't really throw hard with anything, but he's just there touching you, and then he's going to fall into the clinch, hold you up against the cage, maybe try to get a takedown, but he just kind of really tries to put a pace on you. Joey Hart, on the other hand, 6'3", 78.5-inch reach. So he's going to be a taller, longer fighter here. And he's also a boxer who struggles with some takedown defense, but he has some decent jiu-jitsu. I don't think he has a submission on his pro career, but if you look at his amateur career, he's got a couple submissions. He's got those long arms. And I like his striking a lot more than Benjamin's, because I think he throws with a little bit more intent. He also throws a lot in combination, and he's a longer guy. I think he uses it pretty well. In this matchup, it's going to come down to if Joey Hart can stay off his back. If he can stay off his back, I think he wins this fight. And honestly, when I watch Benjamin fight, he's not a guy that's like, I'm going for takedowns, or like he's only going for takedowns. Like he's willing to stand and box with you for a little bit, as long as he's the one keeping the pressure. So part of me tells me that like Benjamin's not going to come out here just looking to sniff crotch. Like I think he's probably going to try to box a little bit with Joey Hart, and I think that could get him in some trouble. So I'm going to go with Joey Hart. I think he's the better striker here. I think he's the better boxer, longer, taller, younger. And I just like what I've seen from him on film a little bit more than Bennett. I think his ceiling's a lot higher for the UFC. They're both pretty young. I mean, 6-1 in their professional career, so very even there. And I think Joey Hart could probably get this one done. Maybe a mid-round KO or mid-fight KO. Otherwise, you could get it done by decision, just based on a little bit more volume. But if he allows Benjamin to get him down and get his game going, then the tides could turn pretty quickly. So give me Joey Hart for the pick. Let's take a look at the results from last week. So we profited another 1.58 units on the straight bets there. We missed that, almost swept. Otherwise, if Tanzalov gets his hand raised with that split decision, we would have swept, would have made another 1.15 units there. Hit a nice one there on Sterling KO. Hit the over. And we got Nicole Cagliari as an underdog. That was given out Sunday night, I believe. So we got early there. We got dog money. The underdog play missed. U3. I don't know how you didn't finish that guy sooner. Unbelievable stuff. And then that was a push because the Cody Steele fight got canceled. Otani pulling out. What the hell, man? Otani pulling out. Crazy stuff. But if you want these bets, my bets for Dana White Contender Series, jump in the Home of Fight Picks Premium membership. Links down in the description below. We're positive 36.47 units year to date on UFC, PFL, and Dana White Contender Series. I believe we've profited 4 out of the 5 weeks so far from the Dana White Contender Series. And the only week that we lost was like a 0.5 unit loss or something like that. So we've been doing pretty well on Dana White Contender Series. Hopefully we keep that up, because usually it's pretty tough to bet these spots just with all the unknowns. But we've been kind of avoiding landmines and picking our spots nicely. So join up there, Home of Fight Picks Premium membership. Links down in the description below. Let's get back to the breakdowns. Tallison, Teixeira, and Arthur Lopes. This is one where it's like, how am I supposed to really like cap Arthur Lopes? You know, like how am I supposed to really read into what this guy's going to do? This guy's an ex-welterweight. An ex-welterweight who didn't fight for a very long time. Very long time. I think it was like 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years. And then he comes back at heavyweight and he wins. And you can't really even find any of his fights. If they are, you're watching it through like a fucking iPod 2. Like the screen is just terrible. I don't know what kind of technology they have in Brazil, but obviously it ain't up to date. You don't know anything about this Arthur Lopes guy. I watched him at the weigh-ins. I think he weighed in at 218 pounds. So obviously, this guy's 6'2". He's not really a heavyweight. He's a fat heavyweight. 6'2", was an ex-welterweight. And I think the only fight that I could find, he was in shape. Like he was welterweight. So now he's 218, fat heavyweight, 6'2". I don't know why the UFC's bringing this guy in. I have to believe they're bringing this guy in to lose, because Tallison Teixeira is a true heavyweight, 24 years of age, 6'8", 81-inch reach, 6-0. I have to believe the UFC's like, all right, we got Teixeira here. We need some heavyweights in the UFC. Let's find any can out there that's willing to fight on the Contender Series and fight this 6'8" guy. And I guess they settle on Arthur Lopes. That's pretty much the breakdown. Like, Tallison Teixeira looks like he's just being set up to win this fight. He's a solid fighter. He actually kind of reminds me of like a Sean Strickland style, which is crazy to say, especially at heavyweight. But he stands pretty tall. He kind of just walks forward. He'll throw these like jabs out there that don't have like a ton on it, but they're just kind of feelers. They're like a Sean Strickland jab. He'll throw little front kicks. He'll kind of pick up his knees like Sean Strickland too. It's kind of weird. Just go back, watch Teixeira's fights and tell me if I'm crazy, but I think he kind of fights like Sean Strickland. But he's got some power in his hands. He got a nice little straight right. He'll throw a body kick in there. I think he should probably knock out Arthur Lopes. If he doesn't, that'd be a big L. But, you know, it's heavyweights. Anything can happen. Teixeira is the pick. Looks like they want him to win. They're setting him up to win. Give me Teixeira. And what I believe to be the main event, probably the most hyped up guy on the card, Aaron Tao, taking on Elijah Smith. Now, Aaron Tao, why is he hyped up? Because he's got a face tat. It's not on the screen here. And we're not talking Sugar Sean like little face tats here, but it's all over the face. And I believe it's something to do with like his culture, the New Zealand culture and stuff. It's a wild tattoo. And I got to believe the guy's a little bit crazy. Because he looked like a normal dude until he got that tattoo. I watched him at the weigh-ins, bro. He does the Kai Kara France thing, though. Like, okay. You got a face tat. You're doing that. You're really, really trying to make me believe in you here. But I watch his fights, and I'm not too impressed. Now, I believe he won, like, the Dan Hooker Scholarship or something like that, and he's training at City Kickboxing now. And Dan Hooker's, like, he's in his corner for a lot of these fights. So he's big buddies with Dan Hooker, City Kickboxing. I believe he's improving. But I do watch his fights. I think he's a little bit undersized. But he's very strong, and he throws hard. He's got really hard hooks. But he's a guy that kind of keeps his hands down low. He kind of walks you down, tries to impose you with his frame. Small frame, but very muscular. Tries to impose you with the frame, walk you down, wait for you to go, and then he throws these big hooks. And he can land. He's got big power. But I look at the Elijah Smith side. I think Elijah Smith's just the better fighter. I think he's the better fighter. Elijah Smith is actually... His dad was in the UFC. He has one fight in the UFC. He was on The Ultimate Fighter twice. His dad's his trainer. Elijah, I guess, he's a great athlete. He wanted to play football. And then COVID hit, and he decided not to. So then he started training, and I guess he's just kind of taken off with his career. Very good athlete, very fast, very explosive, solid takedowns, just because of his explosiveness to get in on your hips. But he's strong as well. I think he's a very well-rounded fighter. I think his striking is pretty solid as well. A lot of straight shots right down the middle. And I think in this fight, he's probably just going to be a little bit too fast for Aaron Tao to be able to catch him. But Aaron Tao can catch anybody, especially on the Contender Series. He's got big power. But I think overall, I think Elijah Smith is just going to be a little bit better. His only loss is to Reyes Cortez, who is a good fighter. Reyes Cortez is a solid fighter. Just hasn't cracked into the UFC. I don't know if he ever will, but Reyes lost in the Contender Series twice, but it was to Christian Rodriguez and Peyton Talbot. Like, those are some tough fights to get in the UFC. He had a good fight with Reyes Cortez. He ultimately got knocked out in the third. That was back in 2023. I think he's a good fighter. I think he can get this one done. I think he can probably win by decision just based on getting the takedowns, landing the better shots, because at times Aaron Tao's a little bit low volume and he's looking for that big power shot. If it doesn't come, then he's probably going to lose the round because he's not a guy that's popping jabs, popping leg kicks. He'll throw them out there, but just not very often. He's just looking for that big shot. So I think Elijah Smith probably wins the rounds and walks away with a decision victory here. So I will take Elijah Smith for the pick. Please like the video. If you enjoyed, hit the subscription button for me. We're almost at 20,000. That would be much appreciated. We'll be back here with Dana White Contender Series next week as well. We don't have a UFC card, but I'll put out some early UFC picks for UFC Paris. That's it. That's all I got for you. Until next time, AJ Picks. We out.